Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Comedy Podcast. I am your host, Brian April. And as always, you can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, and on Spotify. You can watch the video versions of us on Facebook and on YouTube. If you have any questions or comments about it, love to get your feedback about these episodes. Please reach out to me. You can either put the comments below, or you can reach out to me. I am on youtube.com/comedy Brian. You can find me at facebook.com/ 3 days a week. I live stream on Twitch. So if you want to interact with me live and ask me questions, feel free to do so. You can follow me at twitch.tv/comedy Brian. We're going to get into it today. My guest today is a very, very funny comedian. He's been performing for many, many years. He performs all over the country. He does a lot of work with charities, and I love performing with him. He's produced tons of stand-up comedy shows. He's great at crowd work, and he's just one of my favorite people. He's truly a nice guy. So please welcome Mr. Jim Taylor. Jim Taylor, how are you, sir?
Brian, thank you. Oh, you're so kind. Look at all those websites you have, all those ways people can see you. I'm feeling kind of inadequate. I got a PO box. That's about it. Looking good.
Well, thank you. We're glad to have you here. One of my favorite things about working with you, Jim, is I love your act. You're so good at interacting with the crowd. You have just a real ease on stage. You're able to interact seamlessly with your material and with kind of improvising and kind of playing with the crowd. And it's just something that I've never really been able to do very well, but you handle it flawlessly, and you have this great persona on stage. It's a very likable persona, but you have a little bit of some biting remarks and a little bit of that undercurrent of bitterness in there, which I love. And I just really enjoy working with you, and you're just an exceptional human being for a lot of the work that you do too, as well as a comedian. So I love getting a chance to work with you. So thanks for taking some time today.
Oh my gosh, Brian! I'm gonna have to record this and play that part back every time my wife tells me how worthless I am. Well, I should marry Brian. Well, no, you're sweet. Thank you. That's very nice. As far as the crowd work, I learned how to do that. I didn't used to be able to do that, and it's one of the things I always wanted to do. And I used to watch the Masters, Jimmy Brogan, and you worked with Jimmy, and you can go to Jimmy's shows 5 nights a week and get a different show every night. And I told him one time, I said, I don't know how you do that. I mean, I'd get up on stage. All right, I'm gonna do some crowd work. So where are you from? Albuquerque. I got nothing. And I actually had stuff like that, and I went, okay, that's it. I'm not cut out for this. Jimmy Brogan just said, just write. Just keep writing and writing and writing and writing. You don't have to memorize it. It'll come to you. And then I saw Ian Bagg. Have you ever seen Ian Bagg do crowd work?
Mm-mm.
I worked with him at Ontario Improv, and he came out and didn't even start doing his act. He did like the first 15 minutes of his show with the 3 people in the front row, and somehow concocted this whole thing about how they were responsible for the California fires, and it was absolutely hilarious. And I'm like, how the hell can you do that? So I just decided about 10 years ago I wanted to learn how to do crowd work, and I started a show. And you might have done that room, I don't remember, but it was a small room in Laguna Niguel. It was a restaurant, and I made up my mind I'm going to do crowd work there. So I used to jump in the audience with a cordless mic with no clue about what I was going to do. Fell flat so many times, but then you start to get it. You start to get comfortable. You're not afraid to ask the question that just popped into your head, even though you don't have a joke ready. Something comes. And the other thing I learned from that is don't fill your head with gunk before you go out there. If you're going to do crowd work, you want an empty head, which surprisingly was easy for me to do. Just empty everything out, think of nothing, and just go out there and just let it happen. And it was cool. I thank Jimmy Brogan and Ian Bagg for putting me on the right track and letting me pick their brains.
Wow. So, I could talk to you about this forever, because that is the one tool that I don't have in the old toolbox is crowd work. Because where I started, it was you weren't allowed to do crowd work. So it was just a joke. And then I just never did it. And I feel like you said, where are you from? Albuquerque. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for coming to the show. You know, like that's my version of crowd work. So how did you, I guess, what else, what sort of tools besides just kind of letting it go? What are some of the aspects that maybe some advice you can either give, I'll take from me, for example, or anyone listening?
Well, I don't think you need any advice. I've seen your act many, many times, and you're one of the funniest people I know. And people talk to me about my memory. Yeah, because I do this thing with the birthdays at the beginning of the show. Who's having a birthday this month? And then I say all their names, and the most I've ever been able to get is 18 and remember them at the end of the night. But you do the Animaniac song where you go through every country in the world. I still don't know how you do that. Even if I sat down and I tried years ago, I tried to do lists like George Carlin, where like he would go through like all the side effects on a medication. And so I wrote a bit that was not tailored after him, but it involved a list, and it had about 40 items on it. And I did it on stage twice, and both times I bombed because I'm like, oh, what's next? So of course, I'm also getting old. You're still young. What are you, like 25, 30?
I am 47, just turned 47 not too long ago. So
47. Oh my God. I just hit the big 6-0.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you don't look like you're 60 that old. So.
I know, right? That's almost dead. But as far as advice, it's writing. Go ahead.
As far writing, as far as like just having kind of like pre-programmed like punchlines, or just the process of writing.
I think it's just the process of writing, the process of illustrating the absurd, of trying to do misdirection when you're clearly talking about this, and then the punchline is you're talking about that. And that's where I find you get the biggest laughs. That's where you get everybody posting stuff on Facebook. Oh, I see what you did there. That's like, yeah, it's an obvious mechanism for humor, but it's really good. I'll tell you the one thing I have the most trouble with. You said yours is crowd work. Mine is callbacks. Actually referring to a joke you did earlier. I've got roughly an hour's worth of material, and I've only been able to write one callback. So we all have our Achilles heel, right?
Yeah. Although it seems like that's a very standard or formula. I don't want to say formulaic, but it seems like in the specials that you see somebody open with a joke, and then they close the set, with a callback from their opening joke, and it just seems like that's a really good way to get off stage. But I don't think necessarily they're needed per se, just the same way like I don't think crowd work is needed, but it's a good tool to have. But comedy, I think it's different. We all have our different styles, and so that traditional like setup, punch, tag, setup, punch, tag, and then call back later. I don't think it exists, but I don't think it's needed to necessarily have that aspect of the callback.
No, but it's a formula that works. I'll tell you one situation where crowd work definitely comes in handy is when you've got a half hour's worth of material and you're a feature and you're getting ready to wrap up your half hour, and you get a call from backstage going, the headliner's 20 minutes late. Stay out there.
Yeah.
And you're, and so now you were just getting ready to do your last 5-6 minutes, and now you got to fill 20 minutes. So that's when so where are you from? Albuquerque stuff comes in real handy.
So I guess you would just say just practice kind of almost like one-liner type of things, just kind of like just for misdirection.
Yeah, just situations. Listen to people. Listen to people around you. On Facebook, I do a lot of. I post on Facebook a lot now because live comedy is really not happening much.
Right.
So I need to get some sort of validation from strangers, and I write down a lot of conversations that my wife and I have, and sometimes I'll tweak them. Sometimes I don't need to tweak them, but stuff that you see every day. It's hilarious. As long as you can set it up right, it can be absolutely hilarious. So yeah, if something funny happens in your life, comedians, if you're talking to your mom about something or your sister-in-law and it was funny, write it down. They don't know your mother-in-law or your mom. They don't know your sister-in-law, but you make them up, and
Right.
he's there. So there's funny stuff everywhere.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. Thank you for that. That's one thing. Like I said, I always I like to have that rhythm of just like go and accelerate and push, push, push. So when they sit there and go, oh, you gotta stretch. That happened. I was working in Addison, the Addison Improv, Texas, and the headliner, I won't say his name, but he would like to go get high every night, and you never knew when he was going to show up. And the first night, I was only supposed to do like 20 minutes or whatever. This was back when I had 30. And I had just finished my closer. And then I'm like, okay, you guys, because they lit me. And so I did that. And then staff came running up. I did my closer. I'm like, you ready for your next headline? They come running up, stretch, no, he's not here yet. He's not here yet. I'm like, why did you light me? What? I just did my closer, And then I had to like piece backwards. And then you're like going backwards, like, okay, and just the panic. And so every night that week, every show that week, I had no idea when he was going to show up. Even the second show of like Friday and the second two shows on Saturday, like I didn't know if he was there. And so I could either do 20 minutes or I could do a half hour. And so then you start to like try to gauge, and you do all your best stuff when you think you're doing 20 minutes because you just want to hit hard, and you're playing. And then all of a sudden you start going to like some of your later stuff that isn't quite as good or isn't as strong as you're going in. And I'm like, come on, man, like killing me. So then you try to like go the other way. You go, okay, well, let me try to do some of the stuff and save some of this in case he's not there. And then of course he would be there right at 20 minutes and you don't hit with all your best stuff, And it was just, I just remembered what a nightmare that was. And I was like, okay, I need to write a lot more so that I have plenty to go with.
Yeah, well, when you hit the 45-minute mark and you're digging out knock jokes from the third grade,
yeah,
I get tough. But that's why a lot of those musical things are great too. If you can play an instrument to a parody, there you can knock a minute out right there and make it entertaining. There's a lot of ways that you can fill the time. But I'm glad you had that happen to you. And I mean, I'm not glad, but I'm glad you can relate with the Addison event, because that's happened to me. I've been on stage not as a headliner, as a feature, or even just as an MC. I don't want to say just as an MC, because I think the MC is one of the most important, if not the most important, next to the headliner. But it's also a lot of times it's less work. It's also definitely less money. But you get the signal from the side of the stage. They're keep it going. It's like, and I've been out there and just talking and doing stuff and pulling nickels where there was no change, until finally you get a thumbs up from backstage. All right, you guys ready to get this show going?
Yeah, it's rough. So, well, let's back up a little bit. Let's rewind a little bit. A couple of years. What inspired you to start doing comedy?
I had a company, a computer company. I had about 100 employees, and my sales guys used to take me out on the closings. So I was at a closing luncheon with McDonnell Douglas Aerospace Company, and I don't like to talk about work at lunch. So we're with the purchasers, the sales guys, and we're just chit chatting. So I asked the purchaser, "What do you do for fun?" He goes, "I'm a stand-up comedian." And this is the most unfunny guy you ever met in your life. God, I hope he's not watching. Oh, this guy was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And in case he is watching, and so I was incredulous. I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I took a class." I go, "They can teach you to be funny?" And I mean, I always liked stand-up. I never really thought I'd do it, but I liked watching it. I love George Carlin. Grew up on George Carlin in the 70s. He was my idol. We can get more into him a little bit later. So I said, "Where'd you take the class?" He goes, "Orange Coast College." So I called them and I signed up for the class, and I chickened out the first night. I didn't go. I was terrified. I was terrified to go to the stand-up comedy class. But so I went and I did it, and I graduated. They don't teach you to be funny. I learned that. If you're not funny, it ain't going to happen. But they can teach you in the classes, and I know several amazing teachers. They teach you the structure of a joke. They teach you how to find the funnies, teach you stage presence, teach you to illustrate the absurd and think in the abstract, because as comics, we don't think like normal people.
Right.
You know, we actually, and people say, why are you on all the time? You know, I mean, if you're always on performing, that's different, but your brain is always on. You never shut it off. If something happens, you're like, oh my God, that's hilarious. That could be a bit. That's a premise. I like that better. Or I would have said it this way. Or did you make that up? Can I use that? Your brain's always on. So I took the classes and did it for a year and hated it. Absolutely hated it. And I quit. And then, Bill Word.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Word was a comedy king in Orange County. He was doing contests back in 2000, 1999, 2000, somewhere around then. And he asked me to be a judge. And I got the bug. And then I've been doing it ever since. I got the bug. I went back, all new material, and bombed my first time on stage. After I came back, completely bombed, not a single laugh. And I just vowed that I wasn't going to do that ever again. I was never going to bomb again. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep that promise to myself, but it did keep me going. And now I love it. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. You know, I was just curious. Do you remember the first show you did the first time that wasn't the graduation class?
Yes. I still have my material. I found it. I was cleaning out a bin box and I'm like, oh my God, I wrote this in 93 maybe. And I found it and I looked at it and I just cringed, just absolutely cringed at the material. And it's just like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe this might be part of the reason why I hated it, because it was awful.
Yeah. Was it? Do you remember where it was? Where that first show was?
It was at the Laugh Stop in Newport Beach. That then it closed, wound up being a strip club, and then I think it's a Carl's Jr. now. But yeah, I did the Laugh Stop 3 or 4 times after that. But that was a great little club. But yeah, it was friends and family. I think all the comedy graduations are. It's friends and family, so you have a supportive audience, and of course they laugh. Everybody laughs because it's friends and family, and they're supportive. But then you take that inflated sense of funny, and you go hit an audience full of strangers, and crickets actually sounds good. Crickets actually do make noise.
Yes. And it's not coughing or clinking of plates or whatever. That's such an awful. I would almost prefer silence to coughing or like clinking of plates. You know, that background noise. Or sometimes you hear like the kitchen. You're
take it from the audience perspective, though, too. I mean, you get some jerks. You're always going to get jerks, but most of the audience, they truly feel bad.
Yeah,
they feel bad, and then they start to pity.
Yeah,
you know, and that's worse. I'd rather have silence than the pity. But yeah, it's. But you know what, though, it makes you better.
Absolutely, it definitely makes you better. If it doesn't kill you, which it shouldn't, it definitely makes you stronger and go, man, I got to get this. I got to get, because this is not a good feeling. It's funny that it's so hard in the beginning, and that's I always tell people, especially newer comics, and they're like, "What if I?" I'm like, "Listen, this is the hardest that it is right now. Like, it's always there's always challenges with comedy." But in the beginning, it's the absolute hardest when you were trying to figure out what's funny. Why did this work? Why didn't this work? Why aren't they laughing? Why is, what do I talk about? All of these things. And just like that is, it's the hardest period. And then like, if you can survive that initial really tough time, then you're going to be good. Like you'll get through it is what I mean. You won't be good per se, but you'll get through it. And it does get a little bit more, as you start to learn things, it gets a little bit easier and a little more consistent. And I guess my question for you is, at what point did things start to click for you to become more consistent in your shows?
I know the night. I was at the Coach House in San Juan, and I was supposed to do 20 minutes, and I only had 20 minutes worth of material. And so it was easy. I mean, I didn't need a light. I'm going to get through it. And I was just having fun. I was having so much fun. The audience was great. was a big crowd. They were very supportive. And then I got the light, and I'm only halfway through. I'm like, what the heck? What? So I wrapped it up and I ran up to the sound booth, and I was borderline furious. You told me I could have 20 minutes. Why'd you light me? And the guy goes, you were up there for 27. I went, what? I only have 20 minutes worth of material. And he goes, not tonight. And I what it was I used to rush through it. Just like you were saying, it's the hardest thing. What works, what doesn't work. I got to get all my jokes out. I only got 20 minutes. And the audience was receptive. They were laughing. They were constructively calling out comments. And I was having fun with it. And I lost track of time and didn't even get to a whole bunch of stuff. I jumped right to the closing bit and got out. But 27 minutes, that was the night. That was the night where I went, oh my God, I actually, for the first time ever, had fun up there. I wasn't terrified all day. I actually was able to eat. And it used to be I couldn't eat at all, either before or after a gig, because I was just scared to death. And I'd ask my wife, tell me again, why am I doing this? But then somebody would say, hey, you want to do this show? I'd be like, yeah, I'll do it. And then for the next month, I'm just freaking out.
Yep. Well, and you mentioned something in your answer there that I think is really important that I struggled with a lot was I have to get all my jokes in. Like 10 minutes and you go, this is my 10-minute joke. And so if you get to 8 minutes and they say wrap it up or whatever, you get your light. I still get, 5 minutes of jokes. And so I would try to cram 5 minutes of jokes into 2 minutes, which is the worst thing you can do.
All that annoying and pesky laughter gets in the way.
Right. And so I had to just be like, I had to learn at some point to go, okay, you just stop, if you run out of time, or you're running out of time, just do the jokes within that allotted time. So if you, when it happens also with like auditions, and you get like 90 seconds or you get a 2-minute or a 3-minute spot to do an audition, or even a 5-minute, you're like, oh, I'm going to cram 8 minutes in and I'm just going to barrel through it and shove it down their throat. And it's like, no, just pick your best 5 minutes, and whatever that time is, just do it your normal pacing, the correct pacing, the right cadence. And when it's time to wrap up, you wrap up and you say goodnight, and that's all it is. And if you don't get to certain jokes, you don't get to certain jokes. But that was a huge thing for me, because that was fairly recently. I would say in the last 4 or 5 years.
Well, the audience doesn't know.
Yeah. But I mean, I've been doing comedy, 23 years now or whatever. And so that was something I always did. And that took forever to get through my skull. Just go, no, just stop here. I remember I was talking with Mark Christopher Lawrence, and I go, well, what if you get to this point? He goes, well, if I get to my hour, and he goes, they give me the light. I go, okay, well, I'm done talking. That was my last joke. Like, I don't feel the need to do my closer. Like, okay, good night, everybody. So.
You don't always have to end, with a whole, gala performance.
Yeah.
A lot of comics do that. All right. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, that was just very interesting to me to hear that, to see that happen. So let me ask you this: what is the best piece of advice you received about comedy?
It's very cliche, but it's very true, and it was also the hardest thing to enact. Be yourself. And it came from Jay Leno, not directly to me, but through his booker, because I sent in some tapes to the Tonight Show way back when, and I got rejected. But they were the nicest rejections you could ever get, because they would call you back and they would explain why. And Jay had liked the jokes, but he didn't like my voice. I wasn't using my normal talking voice. I was more whiny at the time, and he goes, tell him to lose the voice and be himself. And I was like, okay, how do you be yourself? That's the hardest thing in the world, is to be yourself. Really? How do you be yourself? But, at least with me, and I know a few others, it's true. And it boils down to that another cliche, which is finding your voice, which is the hardest thing to do. What is your voice? What kind of comic are you?
And so how do you, for newer comics or people who may not do stand-up comedy, how do you describe like finding your voice, what is that? How would you?
I think if we could write that down, we'd both be millionaires.
That's true.
I mean, I'm not sure how it happened. I think I started noticing what got more laughs and what didn't. I mean, some stuff got mediocre laughs, and obviously, like you write like crazy, and I discovered when I had 30 minutes, I wanted to get to 40. So I wrote, and I added 10 or 15 minutes, and I still had 30 because I threw my B-list stuff out. I threw old stuff out, and it's just like, okay, well, this stuff got smiles and chuckles and a couple of groans, because groans can be good too. You can't have them laughing like crazy the entire show, especially if you're not the headliner. If you're the MC, or if you're the opener or the feature, and you burn out the audience before the headliner gets up there, you're not coming back. I mean, it's a business thing, so you gotta temper it. You might be the funniest guy in the world, but you don't want to show up the headliner for one. And you don't want to burn out the audience. I digress a little bit, but it was fine as far as finding the voice. It was finding what worked. What was working. My relationship stuff. Dealing with the wife. Me being self-deprecating, because there actually is a lot wrong with me. That helped, and then playing off my wife. That turned out to be a huge part of what I do now. I have canned bits that I've been doing for 15, 20 years. And I talk about my dog, my cat, my bird. I talk about, I used to be in radio, and I used to talk like a cheesy AM DJ a lot. And so I wrote a bit about that. What if everybody in the world talked like a cheesy AM DJ? I've been doing that bit for 20 years. That was one of the first bits I wrote when I got serious about comedy again. But it worked. But that's not my voice. That's not a defining thing. That's a little aside. When you start riffing with the audience, you start doing crowd work, there's your voice. You're talking to them there. It's Brian versus the crowd, or it's Brian and the crowd. You become one of them, but you just happen to be the funniest one in the room, and they're all looking to you. You found your stride, you found your voice, and I guess I'll leave it there.
I like that. So what is your writing process?
I have read all the books, Steve Allen's books, Jeff Corley's book. I've read so many of the books trying to find the writing process. I've tried the grid process. I got hired way back when. I guess I can say now, it was a non-disclosure, but Burt Reynolds died. So he did die, right?
Did he? I don't even know at this point.
Can we Google Burt Reynolds died? Anyway, I wrote a bunch of, I don't know, about 15 years ago, Burt Reynolds was delivering a bunch of jokes for a very old man's birthday party, and he wanted a bunch of G-rated, and I wrote 50 jokes. They paid insanely well, and I wasn't allowed to use the jokes anymore, and I wasn't allowed to reveal who it was, but I'm pretty sure he did. He died. Besides, I don't think it was an in perpetuity clause in there. I think 15 years is long enough. But I did the grid process, old age, things about, on the left-hand side, what are all the things that you're worried about getting old? What are all the conditions? And then on the right-hand side, what are all the words associated with old age? And you stare at the grid, and the jokes start to come. As at my age, when I reach for a bottle of my best stuff, it's oxygen. They were all G-rated, family-friendly. Excuse me. And then I don't have the Rona, by the way. I've just been talking too much.
What happens?
So I did that, and then now the writing style is I just get an idea and I just start writing. I just start writing it down, and then the writing is one thing. The editing is the big part.
And just to confirm, Burt Reynolds did pass away in 2018. So.
All right, good. You have fact checkers on staff. That is awesome. You have
that's what we do here. That's how we roll here in the Uncommon Comedy.
You could moderate a presidential debate. You are ready to go.
We'll just have lies. Just ready lies. Just have the word lie. Anytime any of them speak, lie. We'll just do that. Just keep it going through the whole thing. So yeah, you talked about the editing. So it's interesting though, writing that there's so many different processes. Like I've said this before. I'm kind of a ranter, so my stuff I kind of say out loud first, and I say it out loud multiple times, and then once I kind of get the feel of it, then I shift it onto paper. But there are some people who do, because I used to do visual mapping, like brain mapping. And then sometimes I do like an outline format, and some people will write it out in paragraph form. So it's about, I think, finding what works for you, because not everybody writes the same way or works well writing the same way. Our brains are all different, so it's just kind of figuring out what process works best for you. But it's hard when people don't know what those other options are, and you have somebody in a book saying, well, you have to do the grid, or you have to, do an outline, or you have to, do that.
But,
So
it did work. It did work, but I found it uninspiring. It became mechanical. But again, because you're in the comedy business, you thought, okay, you could recognize that this stuff is amusing. This is funny, and that does work. The guys who write the books, they're not lying. That system works for them.
Yep.
So I read so many of them. I took writing classes. I took Jeff Jenna's writing class 20 years ago. And the guy's, I don't know if you know Jeff, but the guy's a genius. Brilliant. And I learned a couple of things there. Again, it boils down to how can you illustrate the absurd?
Yeah, I
misdirect.
Yeah, I always still take courses online or read books or whatever about it. I'm always trying to learn because, even if it's somebody that's been doing it less time than me, and I hear about their process, because if I can learn one thing, then it's totally worth it. And I just love the science and the craft and all that sort of stuff behind it. So
it's interesting you bring that up, because I've had that very same conversation about comedy. Oh, I could do stand-up, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people talk about stand-up. They don't realize there's a science behind it, that there's a rhythm, that there's a formula, that there are rules. And most of the time we do follow the rules, the rule of three, don't list more than 3 items, don't do more than 3 tags. And the reason is it gets monotonous. People, if you list too many things. But yeah, there are rules. There's a science. You don't put the punchline in the middle of your setup. Now, there's different rules for writing jokes that people are going to read versus writing jokes that people are going to listen to. Because when you're writing and you're just writing a funny story, you can put the punchlines anywhere you want, because people will laugh, they will stop, then they will continue reading. But if you do that in your stand-up, they're going to laugh, you're going to keep talking, they're going to stop laughing, and then you're going to finish it, and you just killed your joke.
Right.
So you could tell the same joke different ways, but when you're doing it for stand-up, you got to end on the punch, because that's the payoff. Right. You don't have to do that when you're writing screenplays, stories, funny dialogue. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, it's so funny. You mentioned that people have no idea, like there are 9 psychological triggers as to why people laugh. And so it's like, okay, can you incorporate those? And there's all sorts of stuff in there, which I always just find fascinating. And I just love looking at it from other angles. And I may never use that approach, maybe, but for, a small handful of times, but it comes in handy at that point. And I also think there's a difference too for those, because I've had like Brian Kiley on, who writes for Conan O'Brien. So when you have to sit down, and I've had Steve Mazan who wrote for Ellen and all that stuff. So when you have to sit down and they go, here's what's in the news, write about this, is different than, oh, I went to the store today and this is what I observed and I saw. So I mean, there's differences with that as well. But it's like I said, I just always found it really fascinating. I guess we come to the question that everybody wants to know, Jim Taylor, and that is, What was your worst show ever?
Oh, how long is the show?
We will edit out everything else except for this.
What is the worst show? I guess the worst. Okay, I have 2 worst shows. I have the worst show that left me devastated for a week. I was doing a corporate event. I auditioned for it. About 4 comics before me turned the gig down. And they told me that probably to get me to drop the price or something. I don't know why they told me that, but I'm thinking, wait a minute, I was your 5th choice. And so I go, okay, we're off to a good start, but it didn't dawn on me why the other 4 comics who were more experienced than me turned this gig down, because the money was really good. Mm-hmm. So I went and did it, and it was for a bunch of tax accountants who were wrapping up a week-long tax seminar. This was their one night before they had to go back home, and it was a dinner with a comic. And she said, well, I want you to do 45. I go, that's way too much time. You know, these guys are going to want to drink, or they want to socialize. They're going to want to blow off steam. She goes, 45 minutes. I said, okay. So I get up there and I start doing my shtick, and I got them for a little while. Then this table starts talking, and then they're getting pretty loud and they're laughing, but they're not laughing at me. So I got to save this, right? So I jump off the stage with the cordless and I go engage them, and I get them back, but the table behind me starts talking. So I run to them. Before too long, I'm running from table to table, trying to keep everybody engaged. And then I get back up on the stage and I start doing some more shtick because I got them back. The booker runs up on the stage while I'm performing and says, the client doesn't want you to do the dirty stuff anymore. And I looked at him and I go, what dirty stuff? He goes, I have no idea. I go, I didn't do any dirty stuff. And he says, she doesn't want you doing the dirty, so you got to clean it up. I'm doing clean. I didn't do it. And so from then on, everything I said, I was like, oh my God. So I just started telling stories. I started telling stories about living in Japan and the funny things that happened to me. And I went from doing stand-up comedy to just doing, being a story guy. And then finally I just said, you know what? I don't care if they don't pay me. I'm done. And my confidence was shattered after that. The client was so angry at me. The booker called me and said, I have no idea what was going on. I'm so sorry. The booker apologized. So that one was a gig from hell. The other one that turned out nice, I was doing a gig in a restaurant, and probably 60 or 70 people there. And they paid out like a $10, $15 cover charge. It was kind of an upscale restaurant. And the MC was so bad. He started insulting the audience when they wouldn't laugh at his jokes. Then he'd explain the jokes. He goes, what's wrong with you? This stuff is funny. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then he walked about 40 people. They got up and said, we're done. And they walked out. And he's like, where are you going? You coming back? We got some funny people coming up. And I'm just like, oh my God, the producer totally lost control of the show. So the next comic gets up and he's doing okay, but some more people are leaving. Then some lady walking by runs onto the stage and grabs the microphone away from him and starts singing a cappella. Like it was some kind of, amateur karaoke night without the karaoke. And he let that go on. And I'm about crying. At this point, I'm sitting in a booth with my head on the table. Now we're down to 2 couples.
Oh no.
And all right, you guys ready for the headliner? All right, here comes Jim Taylor. And one of the couples stood up, and I jumped off the stage and I go, look, I will buy your drinks if you stay. And so they sat down. So I got back up on the stage. I go, what am I doing? I got off the stage and I went to their table. There was 2 couples sitting at 2 different tables side by side. I did 45 minutes for those 4 people. And I had the best time of my life. Wow. They were laughing. They were engaging. It was for 4 people. It was down from 60. But I remember before I went up, and I wish I could give credit to the comedian who said it, but for the life of me, I can't remember. But I was watching some show, and there was an A-lister on the show being interviewed, and he said, I don't care if I'm performing for 1,000 people or 10 people. Those 10 people paid, and damn it, they're getting a show. And I went, oh, man. So I thought about that, and I went, okay, these 4 people paid for a show, and I'm gonna do it. And it was a disaster. I mean, one comic, when there was only like 6 people in a room, was just talking to the other comics from the stage. I mean, the show was over. It was done. So I wound up having fun. And when it got all done, I hung out with the couples. And one guy, it sounds a little corny, but he was kind of goofy anyway. But he shook my hand and said that was magical.
Wow.
And it's a little corny in the way, but at the time, At the time, it was so cool because I was dreading going up there. Just I hate my job. I totally hate this, and it turned out being one of the best nights I ever had for 4 people.
Wow, that's crazy. We are talking with Jim Taylor, a very, very funny stand-up comedian. You can follow Jim on Facebook at facebook.com/Taylor D, the letter D as in David, and James. So facebook.com/Taylor D James. So you mentioned that, and I think that's something that I think is one of the worst feelings of helplessness when you're in a show and you see a lot of, there's a good sized crowd and you have somebody in front of you who has no idea what they're doing, whether it's a host or another comic, and you just see them berate the audience. It's not their fault that they're not laughing. It's your fault, Yeah. And what is that? What is going through your mind? Just tell people what is going through your mind when you see that starting to unfold, and then you see people starting to walk out, and you're just no.
As a producer or as a comic?
Both is fine. Well, as a producer,
I get them off the stage.
Yeah.
It's like light them now. I had a situation last year where a comic begged me for a spot at the Improv. I got him the spot, and I gave him 5 minutes, and he was so drunk that he did the same joke, I think, 5 times in a row, which the audience actually thought was funny because they realized he was so screwed up, but then he wouldn't get off the stage. He wouldn't get off. So we gave him the light multiple times. We killed his mic. He just started talking from the stage with no mic. So I just walked out there clapping, so-and-so, ladies and gentlemen, give it up. And then put my arm around him and said, let's go. Got him off the stage, came back, and then told everybody he was available for AA parties.
Nice.
But as a comic, they start walking. It's not your show.
So I guess just as a message to comedians who are out there who think it's about them that aren't the host or whatever, as from a booker or producer side of it, what are the ramifications of people don't understand the ramifications of turning on the audience from a show side of it, and people don't realize that producers and bookers talk, and
yes.
You're never booking that guy again.
Well, not only do they talk, but just amongst each other, we may not necessarily call and say, hey, this guy was a jerk, I just had him, blah blah blah. But a lot of times it's hey, I need somebody who's like a single dad comic or a single mom comic, or I need a lady that can who talks about her kids, or I need a G-rated. You'll talk to them. Do you know anybody? Somebody fresh, somebody I haven't seen, and then that's how we met. I mean, you referred to me from Tony Calabrese.
Oh.
That's how we met, and because we would talk, and it's like, well, yeah, and in my case with this one guy, I didn't need to say anything. Nobody ever contacted me, but the venue saw him. The venue will never book him. I mean, you're talking about an Improv. That is a serious bridge to burn right there.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never book him. He's tried to apologize to me a couple of times. I accepted his apology, and then he followed up with, "Will you book me again?" And I'm like, "Oh no, that was too risky." It's one thing to freeze, but to get so hammered that and then not get off the stage. I mean, some venues are death on you if you blow the light. You blow the light, especially if it's a finely tuned show. Mm-hmm. And then if you blow the light, that means somebody's either not going up, or everybody's going to have to cut their set down a little bit. So now all the other comics are mad at you because you blew the light. And then comics have no problem talking about other comics. So word will get around fast if you're difficult to work with, if you don't follow the rules. You may not like the rules. If you don't like the rules, get your own venue. Get your own venue, produce your own show. But you got to play by the rules, or you just won't be working unless you're a prodigy. And face it, there's not that many prodigies out there.
Yeah. I not to digress too much, but I wanted to touch on that. I remember very specifically when I was in Boston, there was a a comedian who was very funny, doing really well, and it was very much a tightly run show. It had to end at 10:30, and then it turned into a dance club type of thing. And this comedian, they gave him 7 minutes, and the comedian I was with was a headliner, and he was going to finish and do his. He was going to be on, I think, Letterman or Leno or something, and he was going to run his set. And so this comedian was killing. He was absolutely killing and doing great. He was supposed to do 7. He did 15. And so they had to bump the last comic, which was the headliner who was going to do his set, run his set for Letterman, who was a big time headliner in Boston. And so he was furious. And so the guy was, all excited and doing this. And as soon as he said goodnight and he walked down, the headliner went over and grabbed him, and he's like, "You just effed me." And he was like, "Who?" And the guy goes, "Who the hell are you?" And he goes, "Who the hell am I? Just watch." He pulled out his phone, called up the owner of the club and the booker, and just said, "I don't know who this guy is, but he just screwed me out of my set, that I'm trying to do for Letterman." And he got him blacklisted from every major club and every booker in Boston, and just basically ruined him. And so it's like you never know who you're dealing with. It was fascinating to see. So yeah,
well, that's true of everything in life. Always be nice to people. I remember when I was in business, when I had my company, I had a guy walk in the door with a problem, and actually it's happened a couple of times. But he had a simple problem. I took care of his computer for him, or we took care of it for him. And then I said, and he goes, "How much owe you?" I go, "Yeah, nothing." "No, it must be something." I go, "Really? Had you shipped it to us, and we had receiving costs and handling? Yeah, but you brought it in. All we did was tweak it. You're good to go." And he turned out to be a big shot with IBM. And within a year, I had contracts with IBM with 30 IBM employees working out of my building.
Oh wow!
So it's like you never know who you're talking to, so be nice to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you kind of a follow up from the worst show. What is the weirdest place you ever played?
I wish I could say a strip club, but I've never been booked there. I did turn down a nudist colony. Have they ever contacted you? They
Yes.
said they say you can wear a sock, but and so I even talked about it. I was going to go get one of those French baguette papers, those great big long. I was going to get one of those, but I just couldn't. I couldn't be up there naked. I mean, they'd be laughing before I even said a damn word. So I just I turned that down. But I think the weirdest was a bowling alley, and the only reason I took the gig is so that I could say I did a bowling alley.
Yep.
But yeah, it was a bowling alley. That was probably. I mean, I've done. I mean, I've done a lot of corporate gigs that weren't supposed to be comedy, but because other acts didn't show up, I wound up doing it. Okay. Now I just remembered this one. I got brought in as a comic for Relay for Life one year, American Cancer Society. So they said, "Okay, just a second, we're going to bring your comedian up here, Jim Taylor, very funny guy, got his own show at the Irvine Improv. You're going to have a lot of fun with him. But before we do it, let's bring everybody up who has lost a loved one to cancer and light a candle in their remembrance." And I'm just like, yeah, I'm just like, "Oh, you just didn't do that." Oh, so the people all came up and they lit candles. It was very emotional. I get it. And I wasn't being selfish. I'm just like, well, this show's over.
Yeah.
And probably most of them left right after that, crying, and a couple of them stayed. I did the show, but that was very awkward. Let's remember all the ones that we lost this year to cancer. And here's your comedian.
Yeah, but for those listening, if you're doing a show like that and there's a contract involved, put it in your contract that anything like that goes after you.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
You learn because you have that happen, and then you learn. You learn from that. You go, well, I don't want to do that again. Like, hey, if you're going to announce massive layoffs, can you do that after I go on stage, please?
Speaking of that, I did that. I did a nursing home, and I'm not a nursing home. As corporate event for a company that owned a bunch of convalescent nursing homes. And it was a big celebration of their employees. And it was like a 6-hour event. We had music and dancing and games and prizes and even bingo. I mean, all kinds of fun stuff we were doing. And the owners got up and presented certificates of achievement to everybody, and then told them, we sold the company. You're all being laid off, but thank you for everything that you've done. All right, enjoy the party, everybody. It handed me back the microphone, and I'm like, that totally didn't just happen, did it? And it did. So it's funny you say, you're getting laid off.
Yeah, it's happened, and you just go, please. And so I always ask that when there's a corporate event or a big event, or go, is there anything negative happening? Are there any layoffs or any death announcements or like any, if there are, let's save those for after the comic, because you're not going to get your money's worth.
Well, it's like when they want you to perform during dinner.
Yeah.
I don't want that. That's the worst. You're running a choke hazard. Somebody could be choking on their steak, and the last thing you want to do is jump off the stage, do the Heimlich maneuver, and then get back to it. Hey, have you ever had anybody collapse on one of your shows?
I don't think so, no. But I was talking with Mark Christopher Lawrence, and he had somebody literally die, and then they had to resuscitate him. Is that something that's happened to you?
Yes. He wasn't there that night, though, I don't think. It was at the Improv, actually twice. Once I was doing a winery in San Diego, and the guy in the front row was laughing so hard he had an asthma attack. We had to stop the show. They had to bring in the paramedics. And I actually thought that was kind of cool. He was okay. And they wound up leaving, and we continued the show. But we did doing a show at the Improv about 2 years ago in Irvine, and some guy just jumps up and yells 911 in the middle of my set. I was opening the show, and I go, okay, that's the weirdest heckler ever. And he goes, no, really, call 911. So you can't see anything, the spotlight. Right. So I put my hand up, I block the spotlights. There's somebody on the ground, someone's doing CPR. It's like, oh crap! Demanded. Called out for the house lights we put on. Did the proverbial, is there a doctor in the house?
Right.
And, a lady's heart had stopped.
Wow.
And then the paramedics came. They revived her, took her back to the hospital. It took about a half hour. They had to move a bunch of tables out of the way. And then I went to the manager. I go, what now? She goes, what? I go, show must go on. So what we did is we incorporated her. So she was going to be okay. So her daughter would call in and give us updates. So in between each comic, I would go out and give updates on her. And then at the very end of the show, I got my cell phone out, and everybody called out, we love you, and said her name as I'm moving the cell phone across the audience. And then we sent that to her.
Oh, wow.
But it was terrifying. It's like she literally died. And there was the nurse practitioner at the next table who revived her.
Wow. So how did you, how tough was it to restart that show?
Oh man, it was like, okay, how do you follow that?
Yeah.
That. But the daughter had called me and said, she's in the ambulance. She's speaking. She's okay. Not okay. She didn't know if she was okay, but she knew her mom, or the daughter. Yeah. She said her mom was speaking, and she was coherent. So I opened with that.
Okay.
Opened with that. And then I think I did, if I remember correctly, I did the lame, I'm glad she's okay. And I know you're supposed to die. Did you kill at the show? Blah, 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 blah. I did some of those, and there was like nervous laughter, but eventually they started getting back in, and then I just started making fun of myself again, because that's easy to do, and kind of brought him back with that. Yeah, I was kind of proud of that show, because all the comics were devastated. I mean, to have a little old lady have a heart attack in the show, and that one reason, there was one comic who was coming on, and she was the reason he was there, or he was the reason she was there. She actually came to see that comic, and he was just devastated. And it's like, dude, she's going to be okay. And we engineered something later for her, because she just loved him. So I called him up and I said, hey, you want to go do a hospital visit? And he's like, yeah, cool. So I'm also kind of a publicity whore. So I contacted the newspaper. So they sent a photographer and a reporter, And he's like, okay, let's go in. I go, no, you stay out in the hallway. And I'm going to go in with the reporter and everybody else, and we're just going to talk. And then when she thinks it's all over, I'm going to excuse myself to go to the bathroom, and then you walk in. He's like, okay. So I go in there, and she's all, oh, Jim, oh, it's so nice of you to come. And they're taking pictures, and how you feeling? And the reporter's asking her questions, and she's finally all calmed down. And I go, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. So I walk out. I go get him. He walks in. All of a sudden, she goes, oh, my God. And then her machines start going off. Beep, 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 beep. We're like, oh, my God, we killed her again. Nurses came running in. She was fine. She was just so thrilled. But her heart rate just jumped and triggered the alarms.
Oh, that's hysterical. That's really funny. Get one more question before or two more questions before we jump into, you were talking about your organization, or that you wanted to spotlight, not your organization specifically, but how do you deal with hecklers?
Well, see, that's tricky. See, you get somebody you got to figure out first, are they just drunk and being jerks, or do they want to be part of the show? You come down too hard on a heckler, you can turn the audience against you. Mm-hmm. Honestly, a lot of the improvs, you don't have hecklers. A lot of the bigger clubs, they just don't allow it.
Right.
Dive bars, places, you get people that jump in. You just got to kind of decide. I mean, I don't think I've ever slammed anybody. I don't think I've had all my hecklers have been women. I don't think I've ever had a guy heckler. But I made one where I got a laugh, but I was kind of dangerous. As one lady she wasn't heckling, she was just answering rhetorical questions. My wife thinks I'm having an affair. Well, are you? So finally I just said, look, I liked you a lot better when you were under the table. and so I got a laugh there. Another lady was commenting, and I just introduced her to everybody as my mother. I just, hey, everybody, give it up for my mom. She's right here in the front row. Go get a spotlight on her, please. And so once she became part of the show, she shut up the rest of the time. But it's dangerous. I mean, I've seen some guys handle it really well. I've seen people not handle it so well. And I've seen audiences turn. This isn't a heckler story, but I did a show where it was two shows actually were senior citizens, all senior citizens. And it was both of them were in clubs. It wasn't a nursing home. But they were all in their 70s, kind of like my age now. And one show I did, the guy came out and did jokes like, oh, yeah, my grandpa died. It worked out well, though, because he died on a Sunday night and Monday was trash day. And I'm just like, and my grandma, she's really rich. I love her. I go visit her every week and put a new coat of wax on her stairs. I thought that one was funny, but I was the only person. And this audience actually, they started hissing at him. They weren't booing, wow. They were hissing. And then the other one was a senior citizen club where the opener came out and said, well, I was just watching an episode of the Golden Girls. I don't have a joke there. I just wanted to try and connect with my audience. And then you could just see everybody in the audience sitting back, arms folded. I'm like, oh, God, here we go. So, yeah, you definitely got to be careful about alienating the audience and going too hard on hecklers. Too hard on hecklers can kill you because the crowd will like them better. And don't ever give the heckler the microphone for two reasons. One, they could just completely ruin the show. Or two, they could be funnier than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't let them take the mic.
No, that's great advice. We're speaking with Jim Taylor, stand-up comedian, very, very funny guy. And you can follow Jim at facebook.com/Taylor D, the letter D, James. That's facebook.com/Taylor D James. I guess last question before we talk about some organization stuff. What advice do you have for new comics?
Okay, I can only talk about the way I feel. And I'm all about getting butts in the seat. I want people in the seat. I'm not looking for my people. I'm not looking for my crowd, people that like my kind of comedy. So I'm not very edgy. I try to stay away from the controversial stuff. I don't want to talk about a particular subject that is going to upset somebody because that's not why they're there. They paid their money to go and have a good time. My job is to try and make them have a good time. Let them laugh. So I stay away from the controversy. I stopped swearing. I did that as an experiment once. One show I did, it was in Ontario at the Improv, and I don't know, 20 years ago, 15, 18 years ago. So I just did my entire set but didn't swear. Now, when you do the walk of shame at the end of the show, where you're standing there thanking everybody for coming by, and if they didn't like you, they totally avoid your eyes on the way out. If they like you, they come up. Nobody remembered my name, but a few people came up to me and said, "You're the only guy who didn't swear." I went, "You know what? You're right." So, and I never had any profanity in there. So, if the profanity makes the joke, I say leave it in. But I went to the effing store to get some effing milk because we got GD. We were out of it, and and my wife, the bee, did this. And if you don't need the words, then don't put them in there. Because then it translates a little bit better to corporate if you can get in the habit. I also do a lot of G-rated shows, not G-rated comedy, but I do a lot of family events as a corporate MC, and it helps. It definitely helps you don't get in that mindset where you're going to slip up and do something. The other thing we already talked about: you be nice to everybody. You don't know who's watching. You don't know who's in the audience. I've done shows I did a show for the colorectal cancer symposium for the American Cancer Society, a lunchtime show, and there was a lady in the audience who was related to her nephew was a big television booker, and she came out, and I got a call from that booker, just, "Hey, I don't know who you are, but my aunt says you're really funny. I wanted to chat with you a little bit," and we're friends to this day. So you never know who's in the audience. So you do something stupid, you do something cheap. I saw a guy, it was horrible, a comic went after a guy with Down syndrome one time. And it's just like, oh my God, how are you ever going to get work again? Because, corporate's getting 20 phone calls tomorrow.
Right.
Just don't hurt anybody. Just adopt something out of the physician's oath, do no harm. Do no harm. And especially in this day and age, comedy's going to come back. And people, and we're all going to suck, by the way. We're all going to suck for a while. Comedy's going to come back. Try and make people's lives better. You don't have to be. There's only one Sam Kinison in our lifetime, and he got away with it because he was absolutely brilliant. But he's gone, and I've yet to see somebody that can pull it off like he could, be offensive without offending, and just this is a business. If you want to make money at this, if you want to get known, you want to get on TV, you want to get your face on, you want people to call you and give you money to tell them jokes, don't piss people off.
That's very, very, very smart advice. Absolutely. So that's great advice. Hopefully people are listening to that and take that in. I want to shift gears and talk about an organization that is near and dear to your heart. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
It's a national organization dedicated to reducing suicide. Suicide's a huge problem. It's the number one preventable cause of death in the United States. And with COVID and with the lockdowns, calls to the suicide lifeline, we used to call it the hotline, now they call it the lifeline. Calls to the suicide lifeline have gone up over 2,000%.
Wow.
Just in Orange County, the official numbers of suicide pre-COVID were 1 a day. And I think that's closer to 4 a day, actually, in reality, because so many things get misclassified as accidental gunshot, accidental overdose, when it really was suicide. So, then that boils down to, when you're doing your comedy, you don't know who in the audience is struggling, who in the audience is broken. We're all broken, but some people are really hurting. And being kind, watching out for everybody, keeping your eyes open, asking somebody if they're okay, that goes a long way. There's a San Diego chapter, there's an Orange County chapter, there's like 88 chapters all across the United States. If you want more information, go to afsp.org. Oh, my dog. Sorry, they want to get in on it. You're just
So yeah, you can check out the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. That's www.afsp.org.
Yes.
And yeah, it's an absolute, it's such an important thing, and mental health is such a big issue, and thankfully, it's no longer as taboo. It's getting to the point where people can actually talk about these sort of issues, and it's no longer, like I said, as taboo. There are some people who are still kind of holding out on it, but it's becoming more and more talked about and known and being shared openly. So hopefully that we can. Reduce some of these suicides and these deaths.
That's what we do. We take it out of the darkness. We shine a light on it, and we try and remove the stigma. Get people to talk about it. Get them to talk about it. If you go up to someone who's thinking about suicide and you ask them, if I can take away your pain right now magically, do you still want to die? And they'll almost always say, no, I don't want to die. So suicide is less about killing yourself and more about ending the pain. So if you can find a way to help mitigate the pain, take it down a notch, take it down a big notch. Sometimes there is a mental illness component. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, but it's not always exclusively that. Sometimes it's environmental. Sometimes it's somebody has difficulty processing emotional pain. As comedians, we have a very high suicide rate.
Right.
We're all a little neurotic to begin with. And we also experience a tremendous amount of highs and lows in our business. I come off the stage high as a kite. I can't sleep for hours.
Right.
So, and then you come down. So it's a rough business. But the general population has got a lot of struggles, and there's a lot of ways that we can help. Bottom line. Just be kind. Get off Facebook. If it's being nasty and ugly, it's going to contribute to your depression. It's going to contribute to your lack of feeling of a well-being. Just find something that makes you happy and go do more of it.
Absolutely. And one more time, you can check out the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention at www.afsp.org. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and watching and listening. And I'd like to say thank you to Jim Taylor for taking time out of your day, and appreciate you telling us a little bit about your story and your experience and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. And I hope we get to get back to doing some shows again real soon. And thank you again. And we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Brian, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will. This will end. This lockdown will end, and we're going to get through this. We're going to get out there better and stronger than we were before. The alternative sucks. So no, we're going to get through this.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.